Okay, we're going to talk about paper. Get a lot of questions about what size paper we should be using and what type of paper. First off, I wouldn't suggest running out and buying a whole ton of art supplies for this class. Um, as you grow as an artist, as you move forward, you'll find products that you're more comfortable with, and there is no great rush. So just because the pros use something doesn't mean you have to. But on the other hand, you want to use the best possible supplies to get the correct results, and that's the primary reason that in comic book art we use Bristol. Now there are two kinds of Bristol. There is vellum, which has a texture to it, and there's smooth, which is almost glass-like, and that's a personal preference whether you want it to be smooth or coarse. I personally like it to have a little bit of texture to it. I feel like it takes the pencil better, takes the ink better. Now in the class description I recommend 11 by 17 Bristol. I'm going to get into that in a minute, but I would suggest that you at least start with some Bristol. Now why 1117? 1117 is the standard size that American comic book artists and for the most part Japanese and European comic artists work at. The reason we do that here in America is because 1117 fits into the standard American comic book size when you reduce it. And the standard American comic book size is 6 5/8 by 10 1/8. That's the size of your average Marvel, DC, Dynamite, Boom, Dark Horse comic book. Why this size? Well, it is marketable. It sells. Publishers who have been doing this for 75 plus years have found that when they deviate from the size, when they try something experimental, different size, it doesn't sell as well. That's simple. Do you want your work to be marketable? Do you want to make money selling this? Or are you doing it for an artistic purposes? Artistic purposes are totally valid. But just be aware that big name creators have tried odd sizes and published in different sizes, and they were not as successful as using the standard American comic book size. Now, original art drawn 1117, it's ruled to about 10 by 15. So that means that the board itself is 1117. There is a border around it, and the image that is drawn here is about 10 by 15. So when we actually print that, we printed it this size. So you can see this is the actual page to that original art. This is by Frank Miller, his work on Ronin. It's the original art page, and that's the printed page. It's 1.5 times smaller than the printed size. So, I'm sorry, 1.5 times larger than the printed size. So what that means is the original gets reduced down. Now we do that because when we reduce down the original, the artwork looks better. It always allows us to work in greater detail, to work larger, and it hides mistakes when you reduce it down. So that standard size, that printed page, fits into a standard size comic book. Now that was Frank Miller's graphic novel Ronin. You can work in any size divisible by 1117. So you can also buy Bristol that is 10 1/4 by 14 and I think a half, something like that. It's slightly smaller, it's still larger than the original printed page, but some artists prefer to work at this smaller size. This latest project I'm working on over here is actually done in this smaller size for no other reason than it can sometimes be more economical and faster to draw on a smaller sheet of paper. I found in general, I've been doing this for about 15 years, the larger the board, the faster the page goes, because you don't get so wrapped up in tiny, tiny details. But that's just me. Now, oftentimes people say, well, do I have to work in this 11 by 17 or divisible size? Of course you don't. You can work any size you want to. In fact, Dave McKean and Neil Gaiman did a great graphic novel called The Day I Swapped My Dad for Two Goldfish, and they worked in a 10 by 10 size. Now, if you look at that 10 by 10 size, it doesn't fit in the standard American comic book size, does it? It is too big. Now, the problem with that is that when publishers saw it, they didn't want to work with it. It's an odd size. And that's totally their call. It's expensive to print at an odd size. The printers that create comic books, the The companies that actually produce them, they have to charge more to print at an oddball size. So if we take the Dave McKean and Neil Gaiman book and we put it in a standard comic book size, you can see right there, it's going to be a little weird. Either there's going to be too much white space at the bottom, at the top, or at the top and the bottom. So that would have to be published at a 10 by 10 size. It's also going to meet some resistance from collectors who don't like oddball size books because they can't bag and board that. They can't fit it on their shelf with their other books. Just on and on and on. For 70 something years, odd sizes have failed. So if you think that your project is going to set the world on fire and it's going to sell despite the size, go for it. Publishers like Fantagraphics, they will publish at odd sizes, but they also have minuscule sales. I equate the odd size book to extremely highbrow poetry. There are plenty of publishers out there that produce highbrow poetry books. They don't sell. In fact, they sell to the point that they might sell 4 copies of a print run. And that's something that you have to consider when you're thinking about page sizes. Now, I've also had a lot of you say to me that you've gone to different art supply stores, you can't find 1117. It's true, that's an odd cut. Bristol tends to come at 11 by 14, which you would have to cut down, or 12 by 17, which you'd have to cut down. Dick Blick, for one, who has an online presence, and they have stores in the Boston area and all across the country, does sell 11 by 17. They call it Canson Fanboy Comic and Manga Paper. Strathmore also makes one. I happen to like Canson better. And you can see it comes in different sizes. There's the 1117 right there, and there's the 1014 I talked about. So you can go with either one of these. Or if you've already got Bristol, just work on that and take a comic book and lay it on your sheet of Bristol and trace around the edges, and that's the size that you can work in. That's a nice, easy way to figure it out. So don't spend too much time, really killing yourself trying to get the exact right supplies. And I'd also hate to see you spend a ton of money and then find out, well, I don't really want to use this. But just keep in mind, if you do want to make a project that you eventually want to see published, either by yourself or by a publisher, really consider working at that standard size. You want to break convention, wait until you're a big star and you can possibly sell some. But to be honest, if Dave McKean and Neil Gaiman, who are 2 major players in the industry, couldn't make this book sell at this size, really, can you? So, your choice. All right? Any questions, shoot me an email, and I will be glad to answer them. Thanks.